Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Networking and IT Research and Development Program, including our faster communication practice, the high-end computing program component area, and the Big Data Senior Steering Group, I'm Bob Chaddock from the Division of Advanced Cyberinfrastructure at NSF. It's my true privilege this afternoon to welcome you all to what I think is one of the treasures in computing, not just in Washington, but in our nation and globally. You know, the aspect of thank you all for your interest in joining us, because one of the things that I have the privilege of being informed about are the continuing developments in the Coalition for Academic Scientific Computing, both the coalition itself, but also the developments in the participating institutions and centers. So with that, it's my privilege to welcome Dr. George Strawn, the Director of the National Coordinating Office, and Sue Fratkin, the Washington liaison for CASC. Those of you that may be aware of Sue and the coalition, I think you'll share with me the observation that routinely the developments in CASC are world-caliber developments. But also those of you that are new to CASC and are new to some of this, I think what you'll be also informed about and value are some of the great stories that I expect will emerge over the next hour or so. So in that regard, what I would probably welcome you all. George, do you wish to share some remarks to lead us off?
Thank you, Bob. Since Sue and I have known each other for a year or two, Bob's given me the pleasure of introducing her to you. You see that CASC stands for Coalition for Academic Scientific Computation, which was forming in the mid-'80s, Sue tells me. If you look on their website, it'll say 1989 when they got one status or another. It's about the same time Sue started dealing with them. If you look on the CASC website, you'll see that they have presidents and vice presidents or chairmen and secretaries and so on and so forth. But let me tell you, CASC is synonymous with Sue Fratkin. She's been there basically from the beginning. She's held it together. She's promoted high-end computing at academic centers, has brought more and more people into that organization, has been definitely a force for the good as far as academic high-end computing goes. And therefore, without taking any more time, it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to Sue.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today. This is a unique opportunity because most often when I am called upon to speak, I am usually addressing the issues of what's the federal budget, what's NSF going to look like, what's happening at DOE or DARPA or DOD, and how are we going to find some more money. So today is a fun time because I'll be able to talk about some of the programming and activities that go on at these centers. So just to give you a little bit of background information, there were all of these meetings going on in reaction to what was the establishment of the NSF Advanced Scientific Computing program back in the 1980s. The program was actually established here in '85 with 5 awards, and the other guys, some of whom had the hardware, the earliest hardware, were very upset that they were left out of things, and so they had started a series of rump meetings at the supercomputer annual meeting. And so they met in the back rooms, a handful of them, for a period of time until 1989, when they more readily recognized that it was time to get together and join forces. And so at that point, you had the 5 original centers: Cornell Theory Center, NCSA, Princeton, PSC, and SDSC. Princeton, with the ETA-10, had serious problems and really dropped out within the year. So you were left with 4 original sites. The CASC membership at that point, when they first got started, was 11 members in 10 states, and we had 501c3 status established with the leadership in Ohio at the Ohio Supercomputing Center. Charlie Bender at that time came to Ohio from Georgia and felt he really was a standard bearer for the advancement of high-performance computing of a group of institutions that were outside of those illustrious four. Today, I'm happy to report that as of this week, we have 79 members. 3 of them are the federal labs, Oak Ridge, Argonne, and NERSC. We have the 2 NCAR sites, both in Wyoming and Boulder, and we now have 1 medical school, Mount Sinai, and we have interest having been expressed by a number of other medical schools, and you can understand that because of coming about because of the data issue. So we were originally the Coalition for Advanced Scientific Computing Centers. They changed the name when there was a recognition that this was going to be beyond the original centers, that it was going to reflect the burgeoning program activity at different institutions. So CASC now, and you can see it by the brochure, reflects a membership that is akin to that of the American Council on Education. We go from the very largest research universities to some of the very smaller universities that have programs that support high-performance computing on their campuses, but don't have real big centers. So this is the evolution of advanced computing at NSF. And I might add that there has been ancient antipathy, and maybe even continuing to today, by the computer science community. There are those guys who were part of the computer science community here at NSF when Eric Bloch decided that we needed advanced scientific computing at NSF. And he went to the CS guys, as well as the other directorates at that time, and said, okay, pony up some money, because I'm going to have to pull money out of your budgets in order to start this new operation. And in fact, I have the wounds on my back and chevrons on my shoulder from my interaction with some of the CS community, because they have never forgotten or forgiven the fact that we in computational science took money from the mouths of their children in order to get started. But you'll see the different programs that have evolved here in order to support high-end computing. And we have, as I say, representatives of all of these high-end machines now. The Office of Cyber Infrastructure was formed in 2007. Prior to that, we were within the then CICE, and there was a report that was that recommended the establishment of a separate office in the director's office, and that was done at the behest of this report. And now we are back in outside of the office, an independent Office of Cyber Infrastructure. The structure has us for advanced cyber infrastructure within CICE yet again. This gives you a sense of what this Exceed Award is now, letting you know where the big machine, where the hardware is, what's coming offline, and what we've got coming online. One of the major concerns of the community today is the fact that as the Exceed project has worked to develop the community, to reach out, to get faculty and graduate students involved in high-end computing, what's happened is that we are having a crunch. A lot of the hardware is coming offline. It's harder and harder to get hours, and hours are really not available at any other site. Anyone who tells you that DOE can pick up the slack is not being honest, because DOE has its own crunch going on at this time, and they have 2 big machines coming online in the next 3 to 5 years. right now, we have yet to really sit down and discuss what's going to happen beyond Wrangler and Comet. Oops. There you go. This gives you an idea of the $700 million in research that's supported by the XSEED project. Now, that's 17 universities that are involved with several other sites. It is an amazing program. They are coming up for their review, and it will be interesting seeing how they fare. It was an original 5-year, $121 million award, and then an additional $9 million Technology Investigative Service award. But there is no hardware for any of the sites that's involved in this award. You can see where the research is, and certainly one of the things that's been up for discussion over the years has been the fact that NSF centers support, to a very great extent, NIH researchers. The two biggest resources we have are TAC, which is nominally the Texas Advanced Supercomputing Center. That is based upon the calculations, which you can dispute or not, 7th in size. Blue Waters, they would like to say at times, you've got different quotes. They have never claimed first in anything in terms of size, speed, or support, but they are probably the largest center at any one of our campuses. Those websites that you're seeing are really quite informative and have really neat graphics explaining just the extensive support that they provide for research across disciplines and throughout the country and the world. Now you're seeing our brochure. This brochure is developed on an annual basis. The cover of it is determined by a competition. All of the centers that have visualization programs, and even those that don't, are invited to submit a visualization of research projects. And based upon the design, the style, the size, and the color, certainly, committee chooses the visualization for the cover. And usually that visualization is then framed, and the information about the visualization is on the inside cover, which tells you who the students were, the faculty were, what the issue was, and what they are depicting. Now, to give you a better idea of what we've tried to do, rather than discuss in any great detail what's happened with any one of the topics we're covering, and you'll notice we were very careful. It's called Environment and Natural Resources. At one point, we had it listed as climate change, but then realized this goes to Capitol Hill, and climate change is a terminology that's not in favor at the moment. So we went back to the good old environment and natural resources. This has no political discussion in terms of advancement of high-end computing or research generically. We tried to do a coffee table book, if you will, so that more people would look at it. Now, you'll see why we want them to look at it. This gives you a hint at, and this is one of the images within our brochure, it gives you as insight into the kind of industrial partnerships we have. Of course, the largest centers that are members have extensive industrial partners. Some of the smaller ones are more narrowly focused. So Ohio, while it has a plethora of industrial partners, is really focused on the auto industry. And if you stop and think about Ohio, you have a lot of the smaller industries that are tied into the auto industry in the state. They benefited most, I might say, besides some of the auto industries themselves, but as ancillary beneficiaries of the auto bailout. So Windshields, for example, and other things are the partners at Ohio And so this is one example. Another example of partnerships is Case Western Reserve has a huge medical center, and they are doing work on prostate cancer. And so this is the way in which they have demonstrated their work there. Again, this is a really neat graphic, and we really nearly used it for the cover, but didn't. And this is the energy of the stars, and you know that high-performance computing came into being because the astrophysicists really made the case before Congress and the science community that they needed their own high-performance computers. And so your earliest users of high-end computing were the community of astrophysicists, many of whom got tired of going back and forth to Switzerland and CERN. So this is an example of, now, I might tell you also, one of the interesting things about the high-end computing program as it evolved in the United States is that it was here, it was foresight of Eric Bloch and a number of other people at NSF. The difference is that in Japan, high-end computing went right into industry. If you look at the timing in the 80s, that's when the Japanese brought high-end computing. Hitachi was one of the first big companies. It went right into the auto industry, and that's when the auto industry changed. It wasn't until 1990 that Ford bought its first supercomputer. Until the 1990s, any of the collaborations that industry was doing and using high-end computing was with our centers. So, I mean, there's a huge list, United Technologies and all these guys, because one of the most prominent centers to start with was, in fact, NCSA at Illinois. But the auto industry, Japan went to 5 platforms for their cars. All of their cars today are built upon 5 basic platforms. That's how they could automate, and that's how they moved those cars out so fast. We didn't realize it. We didn't do it. We did have an advantage because the high-end computing went into the university world first here. And so that's one big distinction. The thing that's kept us in the forefront, software. The earliest programs of development of software have made it so that the U.S. has maintained its leadership. And, of course, that's what we're all concerned about now. How do we continue that? But that's one of the interesting background stories of this. And, of course, big data. So there's a very interesting story about the big data. This was a couple of years ago. The whole data issue was brought to a head, and while I don't know how many people would concur with my observation, but it was the real advent of high-end computing into Wall Street that helped precipitate the big bubble in housing. Because, and this was true, the House Science Committee under Mr. Brown had a hearing, and we had a whole bunch of our guys lined up, and they brought in industry partners. So one of them, Pittsburgh, it was a great performance. Pittsburgh was talking, and Alcoa Aluminum was there. And so it was because of the partnership with the Pittsburgh Center, Alcoa Aluminum developed the can, the soda can, that you can crush. Up until that time, the tensile strength of the can was much harder to crush. Now, an individual could crush it, and it was much easier in terms of getting rid of the cans and recycling them than it had been previously. The testing and the development of the thinner can came through work with Pittsburgh. Now, Cornell was among the group that developed and had an office down on Wall Street. You had Prudential, which then had a big operation. Prudential Realty was one of the first users of high-end computing. Arbitrage used to take overnight at a minimum, finding out the prices of houses and the banking and bringing everything into concert. And what happened with the advent of high-end computing is you could do it in seconds. So you now had the ability to buy and sell housing and to do all kinds of creative things with the housing market that you could never have done before. And so I would submit to you that the the investment by Prudential in high-end computing, and they were one of the first realty companies to do so, gave them an edge and started what then became the housing bubble, because you could suddenly get information about housing that you could never have gotten before. It's like watching people today to go out and buy houses. You get online and you can see everything and anything that's available. There's no real one leg up that you can have because you've got the information from somebody down the street, whereas it's now all online.
So if you're against bubbles, you should be against supercomputing.
No. You know, also, the UNLV, one of our other members located in Las Vegas, their graduates and the bigger users are the gaming industry. But that's from the Las Vegas side. The gaming industry from the developers is a different crowd of users. But yeah, we don't have a problem with getting jobs for students graduating at UNLV. They go right into the industry, you know. So the big be-all, end-all now in our community, when we discuss the issue, the last couple of meetings have focused on sustainability, and if you go to our website, you can get not only the tape of the actual meeting, but all of the papers that were presented on sustainability. And big data is in our future, as is cloud computing. We've seen the development of big data systems. These three are the largest, and some of the development of cloud systems. But certainly it's not only, you know, for all of science, it's to support any industry, because people have suddenly recognized they have an ability to collect the data now. There are questions about where they're storing it, and then, of course, the long-term need for it in terms of analysis of it. So this is what's going on. There's much more data and cloud activity that's underway at our member institutions. I've just listed a couple of them here. Exceed has a national data service that they've just started. RENCI is working with this National Consortium for Data Science. There are other clouds. The Magellan Cloud is at NERSC, and NERSC is a DOE site. Red Cloud is at Cornell. The Open Cloud Consortium for HIPAA data is very, very interesting. This is Bob Grossman at the University of Chicago in Argonne. Anybody who questions how well clouds can be used, this in particular, I think because it's so narrowly focused, it makes it easy to access data and store data, and so that open cloud is working, as far as we can tell, while others on bigger problems may not be idealized. It may just not work for large problems, but for this, with HIPAA, it really has been very effective. And now Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Green HPC Center is a fairly new project. It's done by the governor, and it's for the whole state of Massachusetts, and it, in fact, involves several of the universities that actually independently are members of CASC. But when you talk about sustainability of the centers, one of the visions in terms of the future is that in a state the size of Massachusetts, this may be a good way to go, so that not only are there centers and programs on the campuses, but there's a statewide center. And the statewide center is supported by the state and the universities, because what they can do is collaborate and co-fund things that independently would be too expensive to do. And so what they just announced, this is hot off the press, 2 weeks ago, they announced that they now have the open cloud. And so we're waiting to see how that evolves. Exceed, as part of their mandate in terms of doing the collaborative activity that involves 17 universities, and as you saw the earlier map, they did a very detailed, in-depth study and survey of the cloud and cloud computing. And these were in their recommendations and findings, this was their 3 top reasons that they saw. Now, what has become apparent is clearly, like with all other advances, it's not for everyone. Certainly the folks at the NSA would tell you a cloud is not for them. And there are other reasons that the clouds are not for security issues, although security is improving in use of the cloud. But in the bioinformatics field, it's just, there are too many problems. So we are seeing the advent of the cloud. We're seeing this mushrooming of not only clouds on campuses and a cloud with Exceed and other collaborative things. There are clouds, of course, by industry and marketers. Sure.
I was just going to say, I believe that NSA is actually looking at using private clouds, which they can then control the security.
Right.
Public clouds or community clouds don't work for the NSA.
But the thing is that this is evolving now, you know, and we're all learning from each of the experiences, which is important. What's happening in the future? Where are we going? What's going on? Well, there are two things happening, and having been around, it'll be my 25th year soon with the centers, specifically with CASC. I look at a lot of things, as many of you do, as, oops, here we go again. So the OSTP review of the Interagency HPC program is, oops, here we go again, because when the program was first started, it was an elaborate plan involving the federal agencies. It was then reviewed and redesigned to some extent, and here we are again in the midst of another review. We hope that it will see the light of day by this summer so that it can be integrated into the 2016 budget. What will it look like? Well, my guess is, because of the situation in Congress at this juncture, it will probably be a program that will, of course, focus on, I think there are 14 agencies at a minimum that are involved, but it will be, to a great extent, much like the BRAIN initiative, and that will be repurposing and refocusing of money that's already, I don't foresee great investment coming forward out of the current Congress. We are making that pitch. We keep saying about what's needed in the future, and only time will tell, and I have a couple of anecdotes about that. One of the things that you learn about Congress is where there's a vested interest or a way in which you can connect with congressmen and women is the only way to get their attention. That was part of the drive behind these brochures, which have been disseminated pretty widely, but also in going up to seeing individual congressmen. So as I mentioned in the early days, NCSA had a very early, elaborate program of collaboration with industry. And one of the groups that they were collaborating with was Dow Chemical. And what we were able to do is, in talking to members of Congress, is show them the new diaper, disposable diaper, that Dow Chemical had helped make. Now, what they had was this little blue substance, and that little blue substance increased absorbency. So you could talk to a member of Congress, because every member of Congress had at one point or other lifted a baby who had a wet diaper. And so they could relate to a wet diaper that the high-end computer, supercomputer at that time, was working with Dow to determine how much of the blue substance was needed at a minimum to increase absorbency without increasing weight and therefore without increasing price, because if you increase the weight, it would cost more to ship. So people could relate to that. And it was the same way watching members of Congress when you had Alcoa sitting there showing you how you could now smash a can for recycling purposes that you could not have done so before, and it was done because you had somebody at the supercomputing center. We've got great stories about how Windshield Development, NCSA again, was instrumental in working with John Deere. You had stories that were sad in that the number of farmers, when John Deere came out with a new tractor and it had a new windshield, unfortunately the sight lines were terrible, and they didn't realize it until they started having horrific accidents of the farmers. And so they came to NCSA, who then partnered and worked with them in order to design a better windshield and eliminate those accidents. You've got TAC in Texas working closely with the energy community in terms of shale oil and how do you find it. And TAC, because they've got the huge supercomputer that was accessible when you had Hurricane Katrina, you had NOAA coming to Texas to say, hey, our computers are underwater in Louisiana. We need help, and we need it now. And so you've got them coming in and doing the designs that show you, and we've got another image of where the waters were coming in, how it was working, what was happening. You've got the lowest death rates from hurricanes now that we've ever had because of the work that the supercomputers have done. And so it's not only NOAA, but NOAA partners with our universities and helps to track the hurricanes so that advance warnings, if people will listen, advance warnings can get people out of harm's way. The report that's also underway now is at the National Research Council, and they started their meetings last week. They hope to have a preliminary report available by the end of the summer. I would suggest that that's a Herculean task. They've got a very interesting committee co-chaired by Bob Harrison out of Stony Brook and Bill Gropp out of Illinois. And our data guy on there is Bob Grossman. And so they are looking at all aspects of what's needed, how is it needed, and what kind of recommendations will they be offering. So that gives you an oversight of the coalition. There's a list of the members. I can tell you, just for those of you who are interested in odds and ends details, the states that have not identified anyone to join or who have not come forward to join are Idaho, Montana, Oregon. While there are supercomputer centers at the universities there, they have chosen not to join at this time. Alabama was one of the earliest members of CASC, but the center moved out of the university and is now privately run, and so it is quote-unquote a state center. Delaware, the university has a major center, but has not chosen to join. Missouri is just getting started. Kansas has a center. They're getting started. South Dakota really hasn't, and Minnesota was one of our earliest members, but have declined membership, along with New Hampshire has been, they've come to one of our meetings to check us out, and we'll see what happens from there, and Vermont. So right now, as I say, we've got 39 states, 79 members, with membership increasing pretty rapidly these last couple of years, and I would suggest that it's directly related to the big data issue. They're finding themselves much more involved on call and big data, and because our meetings are driven by a program committee of the members, the whole question of sustainability. How do they continue to exist? Some of them, as I say, are turning, and you're seeing state monies. Some of them are banding together. I mean, there's a fascinating story about Susie Atlas at New Mexico, because there was an initial grant from the governor for $11 million to start a center. Well, $11 million doesn't do a hell of a lot. I mean, it barely gets you the building, and certainly won't pay the air conditioning bill for any length of time to keep a major center going. So Susie, being a very creative gal, physicist, went and looked around her and realized that the furthest most West Texas and Oklahoma, closest to them, could be collaborators. And so what they've done is they've got a regional activity going now where all of the institutions in parts of those states are working together to help support center, and they came to NSF and got a grant. And so they have got a center that's meeting the needs of that particular area of New Mexico, West Texas, and southern Oklahoma. So we're finding different creative ways of addressing the need for high-performance computing to serve the community. NERSC is very much involved, and they're in the process, as I say, of getting ready for review, of expanding the community of people who will be seeking high-end computing to support their research efforts. And so the outreach and education and training program of Exceed, we hope, will bear fruit, and we can see that they're reaching out to communities who are interested and hungry for learning how to use it and getting cycles on the machines to get started using high-end. So I think I've given you a broad enough view